So Henry, where does the hashtag farming is sexy come from?
Oh, that's actually a hashtag that my colleague Jeffrey Landau is a huge fan of, and it just makes farming very exciting and new, and that's what I'm all about. So yeah, we like to use the hashtag, and let's be honest, farming is sexy.
Welcome to the 12 Steps to Become an Urban or Vertical Farmer. This series brings you the structured stories of many different urban and vertical farmers from around the world and the 12 steps they had to take to become successful. This interview is with Henry Gordon Smith, founder and managing director at Agritecture Consulting in New York City. Next to that, he also co-founded the Association for Vertical Farming and AgTechX. He's advisor at Huxley, mentor at Square Roots, and board member of Teams for Food Justice. Henry has been in the urban and vertical farming scene for many years, and in my opinion, he's one of the leading experts when it comes to urban and vertical farming. So enjoy and learn from the best. Henry, who are you, where are we, what company are you working for, and why do you farm?
Yeah, I'm Henry Gordon Smith. I'm founder and managing director of Agritecture Consulting. We're a turnkey consulting company that helps entrepreneurs start urban farms. So we mostly do that through feasibility studies. And we're here at our HQ on 40 Bushwick Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. Why do I farm? Well, I think that it's really, for me, a lot about the aesthetic. I really would like to be an architect at some point, and so I like to engage in that. And so this idea of greening the city and bringing agriculture into it, it really matters to me. But I find these projects a lot more interesting if they go beyond aesthetic and go into business and programming and education. And so that's really why I kind of help clients get there, because I want them to be successful with their commercial operations and make a meaningful impact on the city, both from an aesthetic and also from a functional and business perspective.
So different farmers have always different backgrounds.
Yeah.
How do you help from a consulting standpoint? How do you work with the background of each starting up farmer?
Yeah, I think what's really exciting about this industry in particular, meaning urban agriculture using high-tech approaches, is that people who aren't typically farmers can become farmers or become part of farming organizations. So where I like to begin is I like to really talk to the client about their previous experience. What business have they been involved in? Is that software? Is that more marketing? What is that case? And I like to empower them to utilize that in the context of this industry. So if you look at Farm One, for example, Rob Lang is an extremely talented entrepreneur, but also a visionary when it comes to marketing. We really helped him execute that even more and take it further. He did all the work, but we helped him kind of focus some of that energy on his first project and make sure that he leveraged the skills that he had and brought to the table. I mentor a lot of young people as well getting into the space, and again, similar thing. Think about what you're already doing in your life or what you know you're good at, and then look at this industry and look at the gaps and see how you can apply that to this. It's not about being someone different, it's about being yourself and adding additional skills and tools to your toolkit.
Yeah. And like the example of Rob, what did he have to learn, before starting Farm One?
Well, I mean, Rob was a home chef, so he understood the culinary side of it very well. He had done another business, understood the entrepreneurship side of it very well. But Rob had to learn actually about hydroponics and about how light interacts with plants, about nutrients, about oxygenation in their system, about the labor challenges. So that's really what Rob needed to know, and he knew he needed to know that, which is why he approached Agritecture Consulting to help him out.
And did he learn fast, or how did it go? Did you just give him some books, or you give him some lessons?
I mean, he's extremely intelligent and hardworking, so he learned very quickly. Okay. And we learned a lot of things from him as well along the way. Some people it takes longer. It really just depends on their capacity to dive in, and it's really about getting hands-on experience. So you can talk about this all you want, but until you actually start to engage with the plants and work with it, you're going to have a ceiling that's going to be tough to break through.
Okay, next to growing plants, what's another super important skill an urban vertical farmer has to have to make his business work?
Yeah, I think some of it's less interesting, like just being familiar and not afraid of basic plumbing, basic carpentry, because those are really going to be the foundations for being able to iterate and adapt your system. You need to be comfortable with identifying a problem and then solving that problem. And a lot of them in vertical farms and any farm, those are actual physical issues, anything from, as I said, plumbing not working to, this isn't getting the right light, so how can we change that, to a pest outbreak. where you have to learn to identify that. Am I going to get rid of that plant? Am I going to spray it if that's what you're going to do? Or what is my mechanism to respond to that? So those are really a lot of the hands-on skills I think you need to have. What else? I think in addition to that hands-on problem-solving skill set that's needed, marketing is a big asset. You're going to be competing against other farms. You have to be able to communicate very concisely what makes your product unique, what makes it different. I think there's a collaborative mindset that has a business case in this industry. You're not going to get very far without absorbing knowledge from other farmers and what mistakes have been made in the past. So if you're very prideful and if you're not willing to collaborate, I think that you are also going to hit a ceiling on how far you can get.
So you are consulting a lot of farms about choosing their crops. How do you consult them? How do you consult about what crops they should grow and about that?
Yeah, so the first step in our feasibility studies is really concept development, where we work with the client to talk about their ideas and the context that they're based in. Once that's decided upon, and that really is looking at, okay, what's the size and the scale and the approach that's going to make sense with your budget and your vision, we move into our second deliverable, which is market research. This is a critical thing that a lot of new farmers don't do properly. They say, oh, look, somebody's vertical farming and they're doing well, or at least there's pictures of their farms full of product. That means I'm going to do well. No, it's just as difficult, if not more difficult, to sell produce as it is to grow produce in the city. So what we do is we approach it first by doing online, we call that desktop, and we do phone research. And what's involved in that is we'll contact different supermarket buyers, we'll look at their pricing online, we'll look at the marketplace, we'll look at the food distribution hubs and the pricing that's out there. We're also going to look at their competition, and we see what their competition is growing, especially if they're marketing themselves as local. We want to analyze that. We're going to be looking at packaging as well, not just the crop selection. So after all of that research is done, we'll often go and do a focus group, and we'll test the products that we think are going to be the most successful with potential customers in the market. We don't necessarily do major ones unless the clients hire them, but we will at least do that to validate the market research itself. And that's really important. You really want to have your customers excited about your product, and you need to study that up front. So based upon that, we'll usually get started with a set of 10 usually starting crops, and then we will propose those crops to the client, confirm that that works, and then we'll start to build out of our archive what those crops need to grow and how that's going to relate to the design itself. So if we know we're going to be growing leafy greens in a salad mix format, that's going to be defining our entire system in the farm. Now, one thing I want to note is that we'll go and research beyond the set number of crops, and we will set up a plan B. So we will suggest to our clients that in the first 6 months, they're going to grow these 10 crops, or maybe these 5 crops in this way. But we'll also consider what the plan B is and what they should grow and how the system will be adaptable to that. Say after 6 months of launching their farm, if they're not getting the sales they need, if customers are giving them different feedback, it's really important that you design your farm to be able to adjust to that and respond to that. Yeah. And not all technologies allow for that kind of flexibility. So that's how we approach it.
An interesting approach, combining multiple steps. And just here in New York City, Brooklyn, what are the most interesting plants? What are the most profitable crops to bring to the market?
Yeah, I think in Brooklyn, like a lot of major cities, in the context of vertical farming, it still really is about leafy greens and herbs. If you have a smaller operation, and you can go for rare and unique crops, as the way Farm One is doing a great job with that. Microgreens still are quite viable, but you have to spend a lot more time selling. And so there's certain benefits to microgreens. They grow quickly, they're not so difficult to grow. You can get some interesting flavor. You don't need as many supplies or nutrients necessarily. You need a lot more seed. But the certain markets are quite saturated with microgreens, and so it's not necessarily always the right decision, but you still see a lot of that happening in Brooklyn. If you go beyond Brooklyn, you've got some people who are growing chili peppers, things like that, and developing added value products like hot sauce. I think that's a really good way to go. If you're doing a soil-based farm, or if you can find ways to do that in the greenhouse, it's also a great decision because you can increase your margin by creating an added value product. So yeah, if we look around here in Brooklyn, I guess we've got Oko Farms, which is more of a community hybrid approach, and they're growing a lot of large leafy greens. You've got Feedback Farms as well, growing leafy greens. You've got Edenworks down the street from here. They're growing microgreens aquaponically. Square Roots is doing a mix of herbs and different packed lettuces. But if you look at them all, they're all distributing their product in different ways. Although there's a lot of similarity in it, they're packaged differently, they're marketed differently, they're sold at either alive or cut, packaged or not, bulk or small retail. So even if you're growing similar products, there are ways to differentiate your product against your competitors or fellow urban farmers in your community. I hope to see more variety coming into this industry, but the reality is that right now, leafy greens make a lot of sense for a number of reasons. They grow relatively quickly, which is going to help you get a good cash flow, which is very important early in your business. They're also in demand. People do eat them, people recognize them. It's a product that a lot of people associate more and more as something that they want fresh, because it is so full of water, and it is something that you can tell when it's wilted and low quality. So that all lends itself to really a decent situation for urban farmers getting started. But certainly the future of this industry is going to be more variety.
What do you think about mushrooms and insects as a crop for urban
Yeah,
farmers?
it's true. Smallhold is just down the street from us, also growing mushrooms. We don't have many insect growers yet in New York City, but there was the recent Brooklyn Bug Fest that happened. It's too bad you missed it, but it was just a couple weekends ago, which was probably the biggest insect culinary arts experience that Brooklyn's ever seen. That was very exciting. I think that there's a big future for mushrooms and insects as independent operations or as combined with existing operations. I think like any industry, the best practice for that need to be established. I think AVF Amy is doing great work with that, setting best practices, and and certainly a lot of your videos are doing that as well. Because just like the leafy green market and vertical farms, until there's an established, this is the yield you can get, this is the energy it takes, this is the labor it takes, it's very difficult for new entrepreneurs to take that on. Certainly our consultancy is looking at those and trying to find collaborators so that we can give our clients the options, but some of the data on that is still limited.
You also already touched it a little bit, the different business models for urban and vertical farms. If a client comes to you and he asks, what business model do I use? Which question do you ask him to find out what best suits the client?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely begins by asking, well, what do you want? What excites you? Do you like the idea of having a smaller space with lots of levels of microgreens, and you're spending a lot more time out on the street talking to chefs, in their restaurants, of course, too, and talking to them about microgreens and developing marketing materials. If you like that, if you like the idea of the sales and the marketing, we want to foster that, and we want to accelerate that, and we want to connect the right crops with that. If you're more interested in research and R&D, we really got to look at your business model and how you're going to plug into the existing research seed. And is your business that eventually you're going to be growing a lot more unique crops? At the beginning, you're not necessarily going to have a lot of cash flow because you have a different focus. Or is your business, are you really excited about those large-scale AeroFarm style vertical farms? Do you want to be the next Bowery? Do you want to be the next AeroFarms? If you want that, that's a very different decision, a very different business. We're going to be really looking at how much money you can raise. We're going to be really looking at the kinds of spaces that are going to be available for that scale. We're going to really be looking at, what's behind that decision and what kind of automation is going to be needed for you to get there successfully in the long term. So yeah, there's a huge variety, and that's the funnest part of my job actually, is listening to people's ideas and telling them, okay, well, this is a way you could get that done.
So your passion is to build on passion and strength, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it goes back to the blog, right? So Agritecture.com, 6.5 years old now, and it was me, a young guy who was excited about the space, and I was actually inspired by somebody's business model. A guy in Vancouver who was farming people's backyards. He wasn't renting any space. He was just saying, hey, I'm going to turn your backyard into something productive instead of a lawn. So that business model really excited me, and I just wanted to combine that with technology, and that's what the blog was about. And so, yeah, I really, really like understanding and observing the energy in this space and helping people find faster routes to get there, to their vision and to their goal. Whether that's my mentorship of the Square Roots entrepreneurs, my work with Teams for Food Justice, or my consulting work, it's all related to the same interest I have.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So Henry, you're the head of Agritecture Consulting. People come to you with different requirements. Some of them want low-tech farm, some of them want super high-tech farm. How do you consult them about the different types of technology? How do you approach that question?
Yeah, it's funny. I think actually most people today want high-tech farms, especially the ones that approach us. That's really because there's so much excitement about this industry on the internet that they say, oh, I can do that too, and that's a good thing, but often they don't really know what technology they should use, and so that's why we spend a lot of time really drawing out what their goals are, okay? So if your goal is to produce as much food as possible, yes, certainly high-tech indoor vertical farming is a way to do that, but as we talked about, there's not necessarily as much diversity there. If you're in a climate that is actually quite amicable to growing, there's really not necessarily a huge amount of reasons to go indoors. Again, it depends on climate. So a lot of the decisions around the technology are made at the beginning. And a lot of my job is helping to inform clients about the spectrum of technologies available to them. And I talked about this a little bit today, that there are trade-offs. There are trade-offs in the health impact, there are trade-offs in the economic impact, the aesthetic impact, the ecological impact of these farms. And so, it's really about setting up those goals properly. So let's say we've done that, okay, they want to do leafy greens commercially. Okay, so we're going to go for a high-tech approach. Now the next question is, what's your budget, right? And that's something we've probably already talked about earlier on with the client, but that is also going to be a constraint that we need to understand to make the decision on the technology. There's a lot of amazing technology out there, but it's not necessarily cheap. So if we kind of bankrupt the client at the beginning, growing leafy greens with the most expensive LEDs, is that going to help them get there? We can help them iterate. So there's this really fine balance between creating the best, most successful farm and getting enough good technology, decent technology to start iterating. Because so many of our clients are just getting started for the first time. And so they have more important things to learn besides just getting the most high-tech form possible. They have to learn how to manage their operations, how to get their food safety up to par, how to manage their labor, how to manage their marketing. And so when we look at it, we really approach it from quite a conservative approach. So we will actually design the farm and give them data based upon the equipment that we've recommended for that farm. They'll get 3 scenarios. So scenario 1 will be our recommended first scenario. And scenario 2 might be something that has more higher end lights. So it's going to be more expensive CapEx, but it might have a lower OpEx because those lights are more efficient, right, which is the case with a lot of the high-end lights that are expensive. And then scenario 3 might be something different. It might be a hybrid of different technologies. It honestly varies a lot. When we provide them with that information, we also give them confidence levels of the data. So if there's a light that we've tested in-house and that we have internal evidence for, we'll mark that as green. We're very confident about the performance and the data behind this light. If it's a new light that's entering the market and there's not a lot of information about it, but we're putting it in there because we suspect it's going to be good, we feel like it's going to be good based on our professional experience, we might mark that as red because it's not confirmed with yield numbers. It's not necessarily proven. It might be a new emergent technology that's going to give them the advantage, but they need to understand where they're taking risks. And that's our responsibility, to help them reduce those risks and understand that. So when they see that option, they might go for that. If it's something that we've seen demonstrated, for example, at the University of Arizona, or there's peer-reviewed research about it, we'd probably mark that somewhere between green and yellow when we're giving our confidence levels. So really, in the end, it's the clients that make the decision about what technology they want to use. Sometimes they want to go further and they want to actually do testing on one of those red data points, and we'll do that for them as well to help them get there. That's really how it goes. Otherwise, the other technology selections beyond lighting, the HVAC, all of that kind of comes together through the design process. What we do is we first estimate what the farm is going to look like from a physical perspective, designing it 3-dimensionally, interacting with it to estimate labor, and we kind of conceive of the idea. We look at how much that's going to be able to produce. We start to draw out the economics from that, the CapEx and the OpEx. Then we send that over to our economics team, and they have to decide if that's actually a good enough business for the client. Is the payback fast enough? Does it make sense? Very often they say, well, thanks design team, this is a very interesting and dynamic and new technology, new approach, but it's not economically viable. So then the design team has to work again to iterate and to change that. How can the technology reduce those costs to meet the client's goals. And then the economics team gets it again. We go through that process until we get the final concept and feasibility plan for the client.
And what is your favorite technology?
I'm a huge fan of Huxley and this idea of using augmented reality to understand what's happening in your farm. I think when you're in a farm and you have to kind of stop and write something down or put it into an iPad or work at a computer, that takes your hands away, from actually, you don't want to touch the plants too much, but obviously you're going to have gloves on, you want to interact with the farm. But it gives you the chance to kind of dig in and look at what's happening in the farm. So I think the idea of having glasses, if I had unlimited money, the idea of having glasses that every employee can have that's going to be able to tell them this plant isn't doing well, this plant needs a little more attention, this zone is empty because it's going to be planned for this customer later on. Having that information in front of you in an augmented approach is very interesting to me. And I think that has a lot of potential to optimize labor and above all, accelerate the education to get involved in it, because the training programs could really integrate this and teach the students in a much faster way, a much more dynamic way. And let's be honest, all of us have lost our attention span in the face of social media and this rapid fire news cycle that we experience. So education and operations management needs to catch up with that. And I think that Huxley has a really interesting proposal to do that.
You talked about market research. It's very important, especially in urban and vertical farming. What are specifically the steps you undertake to know about the market?
Yeah, I think we want to look at the community and the demographics of the community. Are there a lot of millennials? Are there a lot of older people? And then we want to look at some of the macro trends in the country itself that relate to that demographic. Often we suggest our clients hire a professional firm that just focuses on market research, but this is how we approach it, and sometimes we partner with marketing agencies to do that. So look at the local context, understand the demographics, and understand the number of customers that are potentially interested in your product so that you can understand what's your potential market. You're going to need that for investment anyway, so we want to talk about that. Next, we want to look at, well, how are these consumers getting the produce that right now is possible to grow at a vertical farm? So it's quite easy to figure out what can be grown in vertical farms by looking at other projects online. So you want to look at, okay, well, when I go to the supermarket, how are those products packaged? What are they priced at? Where do they come from? And how are they displayed in the supermarkets themselves? Those are some of the questions that you're going to want to ask. So once you've kind of done that, then you want to actually start getting into conversations with the buyers and tell them, okay, well, we have potentially the opportunity to grow this amount of product and this way, this is what's going to make it different. We see that you're marketing your product as local, you've got a little shelf at the beginning, can we talk about how we could be part of that? If you're doing a big farm, you're going to actually want to get a produce purchasing agreement, which is actually going to be where if the supermarket is going to buy the product from you in advance and commit to that because you can offer a stable price. In order to get there, you're going to really need to understand how your product fits within those potential customers. And you're going to need to pilot your farm to grow the product to get there. So for big operations, the market research goes on for a long time because you actually have to build your farm, grow the product, package the product, test it before the customers, those big buyers, are going to sign on to those kinds of agreements. So a great way to give a human face to the market research you're doing is to have a focus group. What's a focus group? You bring together a mix of people, ideally representative of the demographic that we talked about earlier, but still a mix so that you can really kind of understand how different people are looking at this. You might find out there's a new customer type that you didn't discover at first. So you kind of get this group of people together. Typically we'll send them a survey in advance, which will ask them how many times you go to farmers markets, what is missing from your diet that you wish was in it, how do you store your food at home, where do you shop, all of these things to understand that. How much does local matter to you? So we'll send that survey out in advance, they'll answer it, and then we'll actually get involved in the focus group itself, and we'll interview them kind of as a group. So typically it'll be about 6 people at once, and we'll kind of have different product there packaged in different ways. So we'll say, oh, what do you think of this AeroFarms product and the way it's packaged? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Who in your household do you think is going to be most interested in this product? What are your concerns with shelf life with the product you're getting? And then we'll be like, oh, here's a live product. It's got the roots on. How does this make you feel? What do you think about this? And you just want to observe. So usually you have one person asking the questions and another person who's just kind of observing people's replies and responses. This is a great way to see how people engage in a group. You know, when people are in groups, sometimes they'll withdraw a bit, so you have to be quite strategic in how you draw people out to feel comfortable, to talk about their feelings and their interests. You have to ask very specific questions in quite a scientific way. There's certainly a lot of research online that you can find about that. Again, if you want to do something really big, you should get a professional firm to execute those. But we do those ourselves. We even do those all the time with people coming to our office because we like to understand how consumers think about this. It's a big part of our business. So that's really how we would approach it. We then take that research and we really compare it to the desktop and phone research we did, and we said, okay, do we have a clear enough picture here of how the market will respond to this? If not, we might actually go into even more market research depending on the size of the project until we get that answer.
All right, that's pretty impressive.
It's definitely comprehensive.
You already touched on it again. You've been talking about the 12 steps all along. But
I live the 12 steps all the time.
You live the 12 steps. So when you start an urban or vertical farm, the most, you need partners for sure. Well, it's better to have partners. I think you know that better than anyone.
I believe that. Yeah.
So how do you choose your partners?
Okay, so let's say you've got a commercial vertical farm that's in an urban area, right? So when you launch, you're going to need, let's say you're not like a huge vertical farm. Let's say you're maybe 5,000 square feet, okay? So when you launch, you're going to need a certain amount of attention, right? Because if people don't know you exist, they're probably not going to buy your product. And if your interest is in selling the product, which it should be, then you're going to need attention for that. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. I think one really clear way to do that is to collaborate with chefs. So identifying chefs that are interested in your product, will recognize the value of it as a pesticide-free, local product, a product that has a different flavor because it's grown indoors and potentially a better flavor. You want them to give you testimonials. You want to collaborate with them by giving them produce that they can cook with, doing events with them. These are all really good ways that the majority of successful vertical farms have engaged with. That's where a lot of the trends around food are defined, is with chefs. So you better get to know them and connect with them. Another thing that's important is, like, a lot of our clients are interested in the impact of their farms, the sustainability impact. And so when you think about the social side of it, there has to be an education component to it. So what's the balance? Well, in the design stage, we really think about how can you create a commercial farm that also allows people to enter the space and to visit it. We experiment with that a little bit in our office. While we're not a commercial vertical farming operation, we are a consultancy, and yet we've intentionally chosen this space because we want the public to engage with us. That's a strategic decision, as I said, for the market research reasons, but also because we potentially get leads, and as an open group that's very interested in collaboration and communicating and sharing the vision and potential of this industry, it allows for us to get referrals. The same thing can apply to you as a farm. If you get people visiting your farm in a safe way and an interesting way, you're going to get more attention. Social media can be hugely powerful to get the attention of another chef or a potential customer. So you really want to have at least the capacity to do some kind of tours. There's also potential buyers that are going to want to come by. So what's your experience that you're creating for them, and how are you going to collaborate to get that done? Well, that's a lot of work. You have to grow, you have to market, you have to run your business, you have to raise money. Where are you going to find time to do these tours? So I think a really creative model to approach that is what Brooklyn Grange has done. They are a commercial urban farm. They're soil-based, but they're commercial. They're for-profit. So what did they do? Well, they partnered with a nonprofit, created their own nonprofit that is managed separately, that actually handles all of the tours and all of the education components. So now you have a separate organization that's handling that for you, allowing you to achieve your social mission, but you're not actually interrupting your flow in the same way. They have to book the appointments. It's a trusted group. They probably are integrated in somehow with your CRM or whatever your software is. And so that makes it a lot easier, and that's a great way to do it. AgTech is actually doing that here in New York. They're partnering with existing urban farms, and they're saying, look, let us market your tours. Let us run them for you. Let us take care of this and book it for you and take care of the complex things that you don't need to do so you can farm. And that's another great way to kind of offset that. So collaboration is really critical in a number of ways. I think if you're a vertical farm and you're starting with one approach and you've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars in that approach. What about the other approaches? What if those are going to have potential impact on your business? What if those approaches might be ways that you might pivot in the future? How are you going to know about them? Well, if you're not a member of the Association for Vertical Farming, if you're not a member of the NYC Ag Collective, or if you haven't created your own community, you're not going to be learning about the other approaches at all. So it's very critical to collaborate with other farms for that reason. I'll give you another reason. Let's say you run out of product. Let's say some pest outbreak happens. Let's say you have a problem. If you haven't been collaborating with other urban farms, you're going to have a difficult time finding local product that's grown in the wintertime to be able to give to those customers. If you don't give that customer what they need in the wintertime, you're going to lose that customer. So although it shouldn't happen very often, on those few occasions when you can't deliver on products to your customer, you're going to need collaborators to step in and help. And that's what a community of urban farms can really do for each other. Even for us, we've wanted to experiment with some different packaging and things like that. EdenWorks had extra packaging from their R&D. They brought it over, they gave it to us. That's a great way you can share different equipment. You've got DO meters, dissolved oxygen meters, which cost a lot of money. Every urban farm doesn't need one of those. So you can collaborate and buy that together. You've got vehicles and transportation that you can share and collaborate over. You've got cross-marketing. This is one of the major ways that the NYC Ag Collective collaborates, is we cross-market and we retweet and reshare each other's posts. These are all ways that need to happen, all activities that need to happen for this industry to grow sustainably. And so collaboration is, in my opinion, a requirement.
A requirement to run your farm, but also to have the impact you actually want.
Yeah.
So Henry, a location of a farm is very important. What are the parameters you need to work with?
Yeah, so before we select the location, we really need to talk about the integration type. So are you going to go, again, we do all the spectrum of urban agriculture. A lot of our work is on the vertical farming side, this high-tech side of the spectrum, but also low-tech, soil-based, outdoor hydroponic systems, things like that. So once that's decided, those systems shine in different environments. For example, stacked LED systems are really going to shine where you have no sunlight, no pun intended. So you don't actually need any light in those circumstances. They'll often distract the plants, literally sending them in different directions. If there's too much of it, they'll affect the temperature. They'll make it more difficult for you to do your energy modeling. So in the context of a stacked indoor vertical farm, you want to find a specific kind of warehouse. Another decision that would have been made earlier on is what's the range of scale, and that's usually going to be driven by the budget, right? How much the entrepreneur is willing to raise or spend at the beginning. So once we know that, we can really begin to select the location for the farm. And so when we're looking at warehouses in the context of vertical farming, we're really looking for buildings. They don't necessarily have to be super, super tall unless the real estate costs are very high per square foot. If they are, then you're looking for something that is quite tall. But if they're not, then you could look for something that could fit at least 5 layers of cultivation in it. The biggest things that we're looking for is, does the building have enough power? A lot of lights, a lot of HVAC, and you'd be surprised how many industrial warehouses do not actually have the amperage required to power a vertical farm, even here in New York City. So it's a much harder means to get there. It's also very difficult. You need to understand how do you work with the utility company, because you're bringing on a whole new set of energy load to the grid, and often they won't give you an accurate estimate unless you work with them a lot, and some are not as good to work with as others. So if you don't understand that, then you actually don't really know how it's going to perform. You don't actually know what your economics are, so you need to look at that. Drainage is really valuable. You can obviously install it, but it's very expensive to do that. It's going to have permitting. Not very expensive, but it can be expensive, and it can delay your work a lot because of the permitting matters. So that's another thing you're going to be looking for, is drainage. You're going to want to look at how are you going to get product in and out of the building. So again, this is industrial, so typically most of them will have doors that lift up and different distribution bays. You're going to want to look at that. You're going to want to look at the space and think about, okay, well, where am I going to work in the space? Where's the office going to be? Where is the fridge going to be? Where is the food safe cleaning area going to be? What biosecurity am I going to embed into here? I mean, there's really so many factors, and you want to imagine that. So
You don't want to discourage people starting.
I'm not discouraging people. I'm just trying to educate people. Yeah, it's definitely possible. But so those are some of the things that we would look at. If you're doing a rooftop greenhouse, we're going to do a solar analysis, and we're going to get a structural engineer to look at how supportive the roof is of it, and we're going to look at other things like. Actually, in the context of a warehouse or a rooftop greenhouse, we're going to look at incentives. What grants are available for managing rainwater or creating jobs in that community? Those are all things that are going to make the case. So often we'll have a large number of sites. We had a recent client in Mexico City that we went down and looked at a number of sites and visited them and really helped to define the canvas, and then we kind of finish up the design. So sometimes we'll just do design to a certain stage, then we'll look, how are we going to actually choose our building? Okay, this is the building we want. Now we update the design. So your site is really your canvas. So it's very important to have a specific checklist. We give our clients a specific checklist if they're not in New York City that they go through, and then they upload their images and the details of the site, and then we review them with them.
Just a small question still about location. How does it affect, your farm, your logistics of your farm to get your produce to your?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, ideally, if you're going with a large-scale vertical farm, you're going to be quite close to the distribution hub. A lot of people think, okay, well, I'm 2 hours away from the distribution hub. I'm 1 hour from the distribution hub. Okay, well, that's something. That's something that's going to have traffic, that's going to have a cost, that's going to have food going in and out of the vehicles. So if you can get as close as possible to the distribution hub, or if you can actually partner with one, that's going to be a great win. Again, that's a particular type of vertical farm, is those warehouse ones. So, I think in the context of those, you really want to be as close as possible to distribution hubs. In most cases, for these vertical farms, you're looking at peri-urban areas around the city in general, because the costs are going to be lower. You still get all the benefits of power and water and decent access to the city. So you don't really have to think about a vertical farm as being in Manhattan. It's probably going to be likely in New Jersey or the Bronx or East Brooklyn. That's where you're probably going to find your larger scale vertical farms in the future.
You help clients write a business plan, I guess. And after that business plan, you need to kind of find financing. How do you go about financing your farm?
Our clients sometimes come to us with business plans, and sometimes they come to us with business ideas. And so when it's just the business idea, we help them develop the business plan. If it's the business plan, then we help them kind of do due diligence and give a third-party validation that they are doing the right approach and what adjustments are needed there. So after all of that is done, we really understand how much money is needed to be raised, how much do they have already, and what do we need to go out and get. We are not the experts in fundraising for vertical farms. We're mostly the experts in helping to validate a business idea and all of the elements of that farm, the design, the layout, the marketing, all of that to make the case for an investor. We've talked a lot about helping our clients get there and making introductions to investors, and we've started to do that a little bit now. And I think we might do more of that in the future. But again, it's very important to focus on what we're really good at. So I guess my answer would be, there are other people in this space that are more familiar with raising money for vertical farms. That would be good for that specific part of it.
How cheaply or how expensive can you build a vertical farm?
Yeah, I like that question. I mean, I think, so it depends how you define a vertical farm. I define it really as farms that are integrated into buildings and spaces that utilize three-dimensional approaches.
Let's talk about a business.
Okay.
I've heard businesses that start up with $10,000.
Right.
Do you think that's an absolute minimum? Can you go?
I'd say, when you account for the runway you need as well, obviously you're just talking about equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about runways, all the startup,
Right. But for the equipment, the first equipment that you needed, yes, you could have a small kind of cottage business. Yeah, sure, with 10,000, maybe even with 5,000 if you're doing microgreens high end and selling those. I would definitely budget for $20,000 at the beginning with the equipment and the kind of things you're going to need to respond to. If you're doing well, you're going to need to expand, no matter how small you are. And I think that you need to have that budget in place and at least the space for that. But what's exciting about this technology is that, there are things you can do at a small scale and be successful.
How many months would you think about the running cost for your farm? you know, you start up your farm, you have your equipment.
Yeah, whenever you're raising money or starting a new business, from what I've talked about with a lot of people about is you want an 18-month runway. Mostly that's because that's really enough time to start to prove the business. And then after that 18 months, you have a better idea of the data and you can go out and raise more money based on what you've proven or what you still need to prove. That you can also raise money based upon that. So I think 18 months is a good number. It's always better to be safe. So if you can get more, that's great. But the risk is, again, more people know more about the equity situation and those kinds of deals. But you might not necessarily want to give up too much equity by raising too much money up front, and save some for fundraising bigger amounts later on once you have more data and you've proven that you can grow and sell. Because that's really when you're going to get the bigger investments.
How would you advise someone, let's say in South Africa or China, to find out about the law and policies affecting their business?
Yeah, it really does vary based upon region, but mostly it's around building code is a big law, let's say, that it's going to affect that. So really no matter where you are, there's going to be at least zoning for commercial, residential, industrial. Usually vertical farming is going to lie in the commercial or the light industrial areas of that. So go to your municipal website, look at the zoning, look at the neighborhoods that have that zoning, and that's going to begin to hone in on the potential sites that you have to work with. Again, this is again in the context of a reasonably sized commercial vertical farm. That's what we're talking about here. For other kinds of properties, other kinds of farms, there's different properties available. So that's one issue. Another one is going to be fire code, and that again should be something you should find pretty easily. In certain regions, you need a different spacing between your systems. So imagine the disaster that you buy a system and then the fire department comes and they say, well, I don't care how much you spent, this is illegal, and you have to shut down, or you have to demolish this particular system to create more space. That's not a situation you want to be in. That's not a situation you need to be in. You don't need a consultant to find fire code and to look that up. So you want to do that. The next thing is going to be food safety and food handling. So you want to understand what's your staffing going to need to have from a certificate perspective, what's your product need to have from a certificate perspective, what about your space, how is that going to need to be food safe, and what equipment is needed to help you execute that properly. I think also you're going to want to look at labor laws. A lot of farms in general have discounted or free labor. That's often illegal, so you need to look at that. You can't simply say, okay, we've got unpaid interns, for example, in New York City, that's not allowed. You need to have a specific relationship with that individual in a contract that lists them as a volunteer. So that's something you don't want to get into trouble with by any means. What else could we look at? I'd say those are the major ones. You've got things like, light pollution. You've got things like water effluent coming out of your farm that could affect you legally. There's definitely Bright Farms just got hit with some issues with that. They were dumping nutrients into the water stream. That was a problem. So you got to be careful, and it's a complex challenge. And if it's easy, then you're missing something.
Okay, so the legal part of business is never easy.
Yeah.
Mr. Henry Gordon Smith from Agritecture Consulting, co-founder Association for Vertical Farming. What else do you do? AgTechX?
There's an advisor at Huxley. I'm a mentor at Spread Roots. I'm a board member at Teach for Justice.
So basically you're like a vertical farming hero, pioneer.
I'm just a nerd. I just like vertical farming a lot.
Okay, but it was not always like that.
No.
Like 6 years ago you just started.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give the Henry from 6 years ago before getting into the scene?
Yeah, I apologize if you heard this before, but I really have the same advice. So there's 3 main things you need to be successful as a vertical farmer. Number one, you need to build up your archives. So you need to understand what data is out there, what data you have, do your own experiments. When people tell you about what they're growing, how they're growing it, you want to record that and you want to put that easily in a Google Sheet or a Google folder. Keep growing that archive. That's going to make you more effective when you're networking. It's going to make you more effective when you're comparing your project to others. it's going to make you more effective when you're running your own operation, is beginning to track that data and build up your archive. The next one is hands-on experience. So if you don't have hands-on experience growing plants from seed to harvest, you're going to want to do that at home as soon as possible, or find some collaborators to build a small system to test that out, or even better, get a job or volunteer at an existing commercial operation. And the more variety you can learn in that hands-on experience, the better, especially in the early days. And you're going to want to not only look at the plant physiology and what's happening with the plant and how to make the plant be as successful as possible, but you're going to want to look at all the systems relating to that, the lights, the water, the plumbing, the ventilation. You're going to want to look at food safety and get experience with that.
The 12 steps
to practice, yeah, all of those, practice all of those things. So the hands-on experience is number 2. So number 3 is really to grow your network. So we talked a lot about collaboration. That can't happen if you don't know people, and so you really need to go out there. And my tip for networking in this industry is don't go out there thinking, okay, what can I get from this person? Who can they introduce me to? What can they teach me? But instead, think about yourself and what you can give that person. It's going to help you be a lot more confident and a lot more specific in your discussions with people at events or when you approach them via LinkedIn or email. Talk to them about what you can offer them. If it's hard for you to come up with something, think of something small, like an interview or a video or something that you could write about.
Oh, that's not small. An interview is not
small.
small.
It's not small. Isn't it's not necessarily, it might seem small, but you know, a lot of people with successful ideas are happy to share them. And so you want to find those people and give them an opportunity to share that. It's going to be a great way for you to grow trust in that network. And trust me, once you've helped somebody out, it's going to be a lot easier for you to be confident to follow up with them and say, hey, can we collaborate on this? Or hey, do you have a job? Or hey, do you want to work for me? Whatever that is. The fourth part, which I see as the foundation, is not being afraid to brand yourself. I see a lot of people coming into this space and they're saying, well, I'm interested in vertical farming. Okay, well, it's not enough. You know, what is your interest and what are you going to contribute to it? You know, my name is Jeff Van Ecker, and I build videos about the 12 steps to vertical farming, and I empower new growers to be successful. That's a very clear message. It's a very clear brand that people are going to remember. That's how they're going to be able to recommend you to other people. That's how they're going to remember you and follow up with you. If people don't remember you, they're not going to talk to you. And so you need to be comfortable with branding yourself and what your approach is in this industry and what you're bringing to the table. So those are my tips. Follow them.